Hello, everyone, and thank you for making the time to be with us here today in our first quick cast for the 2025-2026 InnovED. I'm your host and the InnovED host, Sharif Al-Sharif. InnovED is the innovation and entrepreneurship space of Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, and it is the University of Toronto's 11th incubator. Future-ready classrooms, the power of experiential learning in K-12 education is the title of our quickcast. Our guest speaker is Dr. Karen O'Mara. Dr. Karen is the experiential learning consultant for the York Region District School Board, where she supports educators in implementing student-centered education through inquiry-based, project-based, and learning models. Additionally, Karen leads the YRDSB's entrepreneurship program, supporting innovation and creativity across the school system. She's the co-founder of the successful YRDSB York University Experiential Arts Mentorship Program, and her research for her PhD from York University focuses on how mentorship can support student agency and voice within arts-based experiences. Karen holds a degree in dramatic arts from Queen's University, an MBA from the University of Windsor, and a Bachelor of Education and a PhD from York University, bringing over 20 years of experience as a dramatic arts educator to her current role. Today, Karen will tell us more about experiential learning, addressing topics such as what is experiential learning, examples of experiential learning, and tips for facilitating experiential learning in a K-12 context. Karen, thank you for being here with us today, and the mic is yours.
Thank you so much, Sharif, and welcome everybody. It is an absolute pleasure to be here today to have this conversation about future-ready classrooms and the power of experiential learning in K-12 education. So, as Sharif mentioned, today on our learning journey, we are going to be speaking about experiential learning and what is experiential learning. We're going to look at a concrete example from the York Region District School Board and a partnership that we had with Experiential Learning. And then we're going to end off today's conversation with some tips for facilitating experiential learning in that K-12 context. So let's take it away. What is experiential learning? And as we begin our conversation today, let's ground our work in David A. Kolb's experiential learning theory and his framework that he developed that helps us think about how people navigate life and navigate learning, because learning happens in any setting and learning continues throughout our lives. And so this framework encourages us to think about how and why we learn. And Kolb has a 4-stage cycle. And so you might say, what does that mean? Well, first of all, in Kolb's experiential learning cycle, participants go through a concrete experience where they have an opportunity to engage in hands-on tasks. And they utilize often emerging technology. But it is the next stage, the reflective observation stage, that is so critical to Kolb's work, because it gives learners an opportunity to pause and analyze their experience. And this is where they internalize those concepts that they've just had an opportunity to explore. Then they actually move into abstract conceptualization, which is where they synthesize those concepts together. And this is where that experience that they've just participated in becomes meaningful to them. And then they have the active experimentation stage, where they actually get to apply their learning. And this is often where they experiment with real-world challenges that make them think about potential life or career pathways. And so at the York Region District School Board, we try to use the experiential learning cycle as a framework for us to create inclusive and future-ready classrooms. According to Kolb, there are 2 goals in this experiential learning process. The first is for the learner to explore an area of interest or a particular subject. But the second is for them to learn about their own learning process. And the result of this cycle is the development of critical transferable skills and an understanding of the real-world application of classroom learning. And those transferable skills like communication or problem solving or collaboration, they are critical to success in the future. According to Jennifer Stanchfield, who is the author of Inspired Educator, Inspired Learning, optimal change and growth, they take place when people are actively, physically, socially, emotionally, and intellectually involved in their learning. But it is that reflective moment, that reflective pause, where they're actually able to transfer that knowledge to real-world situations. So you might wonder, what does all of this look like within a classroom context? And so let's take a look at the Ministry of Education's Experiential Learning Guidelines. They break it down into 3 simple steps. When you're working with students, they have an opportunity to participate in an experience. And that experience is connected to the community and it's connected to industry. But then the students, after that experience has taken place, reflect on those experiences. And that's where that becomes meaningful for them. But it isn't experiential learning if the students don't have an opportunity to apply their learning. So you have to build in that application stage where students can truly see how that learning has influenced various aspects of their life. And this can help them in terms of their long-term, future-ready education and career life planning. So why do we think experiential learning is so critical to success in our K-12 classrooms? Because it offers students a connection to the real world. But again, I go back to those transferable skills like entrepreneurship, creativity, and innovation. It helps to prepare them for the world of the future. We don't know what that world will look like, but we do know that those transferable skills are crucial to success in wherever the future may take us. It also helps students to engage in education and career life planning because they may be exposed through those experiences to a variety of careers, areas of interest, or pathways for the future. And it also helps students to develop global competencies that are critical in their future learning. So let's dive a little bit deeper into what this actually looks like. And we're going to talk through an example of an experiential learning opportunity that we've recently offered within the York Region District School Board. So in our region, the agri-food sector is evolving faster than ever before. And we work in York Region, and in our backyard is the Holland Marsh. So it's a large agricultural area. And farmers are aging, and there's a significant need within our region for a future-ready workforce who's prepared to support agricultural innovation. And so we had an opportunity to partner with a local farm, Oriel Farms, and also to partner with another community organization from York Region, STEM Minds. And we worked together to bridge both education and industry. Our main goal was a half-day immersive experience where students could hear about the future of farming, but also step directly into it. So not only would they have access to traditional instruction, but also real-world application. The scale of our experiential learning program was quite significant. We were able to engage 400 plus students in this experience. And we successfully brought together students from grades 9 through 12, but we intentionally picked subject areas where students may not see agriculture as a first choice career pathway. So we picked business, geography, family studies, and computer science. We were able to reach 18 of our 33 secondary schools with this experience, and we were able to bridge the gap between classroom theory and real-world agricultural application. And what came from that was a rich dialogue amongst our students, amongst these various subject areas, about where our food comes from and how that food is going to be sustainable and who's going to be responsible for it in the future. We wanted students to understand that agriculture isn't just about planting a seed, but instead it's a complex global value chain. And so while students had an opportunity to learn about the historical context of farming in the classroom, we brought them to the farm with a lens focused towards the future and the new and exciting emerging technologies that are within the agricultural sector. Students examined how food can move from a local farm in our area to their tables, but also to a larger, more global table. And as we made that personal for students, students began to see themselves within the industry. And this is where the agri-tech element really came to life. We had a chance to introduce students to the tools of the future, and we moved beyond the tractor and into the world of drones, artificial intelligence, and robotics. Actually, in this image here on the screen, you can see there's a robot that is actually tilling the field, and the students are learning all about how that robot can do that work on the farm. So students didn't just watch the demo. After they had a demo, they got to go back and they got to experiment with smaller versions of the same hardware, and they got to experiment with the different software, and they got to see the real world application of how they could bring a smaller scale technology back to their classroom, but also to their homes. And so the goal of this project was to not only expose them to the emerging technologies, but also to make that learning accessible to the students. The true highlight for the students was the time that they spent at Boreal Farms. They got to witness the harmony between regenerative practices, so focusing on how soil is regenerated to be healthy, and different carbon capture options, but they also got to explore cutting edge technology. I remember talking to two students who were heading back to the bus, and I asked them to reflect on their experience. And I said, what are you taking from this experience back to the classroom and back home with you? One of the students said, I had no idea that tomatoes were a cash crop. I'm going to be going home and I'm telling my parents we need to plant tomatoes in our garden. That student was a business student who had learned more about the financials behind the decisions that are made on a farm and how you specifically plan your crops out on the farm so that you have the biggest bang for your buck. Another student told me that his grandmother loves to garden, and he said, I'm going to go home and I'm going to ask my grandma to teach me how to plant some plants that I can use within cooking. And this was one of our family studies students who was inspired to go home, learn from his grandmother about plants that he could cook with in his own kitchen. And so what happened was those students directly connected the experience to their families and to their communities. And when that happened, they saw themselves represented within the work, but they also found that experience to be meaningful, and they had a real world application that they could take away from the experience. This partnership was also a strategic investment because we were able to expose our students to non-traditional career pathways. And hopefully we're ensuring that in York Region, our workforce is prepared to lead not only environmental sustainability, food security, but also agricultural innovation, which, as I mentioned before, is expanding rapidly. When we brought students to the farm, we weren't just teaching them about jobs. We were preparing them for the future for in-demand careers, careers that solve global challenges. And we were also encouraging them to activate those transferable skills in each of the activities that they participated in. This infographic is a summary of the student feedback that we received. And so as you can see, students blended traditional farm experience, seeing the chickens, learning about the chickens, patting the chickens. The chickens were definitely a highlight, with the exciting agricultural innovation. So the robotics, they were key, and seeing how the drones operated and how they can just make agriculture so much more sustainable was very exciting for students. But also the hands-on learning about food. And I remember the students picking a mustard plant, and Brandon from Boreal Farm said, hey, do you want to try tasting the mustard plant? So we tasted the mustard plant, and it tastes exactly like Dijon mustard you can buy in the store. And the students couldn't believe that it could have that kind of a flavor. So it was a very, very exciting hands-on experience for the students. So you might be wondering, wow, this is great. That was a very large scale event. How do we do that within a K-12 context? How can I take what you've just shared with me and apply it to my own organization, my own institution? So let's go through some tips for K-12 educators. It's really important that you think about this as more than just hands-on. As we think about replicating that success, let's go back to the words of Jennifer Stanchfield in talking about our why do we do experiential learning. And remember that optimal growth happens when we engage the whole student. So we engage them both intellectually and emotionally. So remember, we need to shift students away from being passive receivers of information to being active participants in their own discovery. And the more that you can engage students in leading their own learning and driving that discovery forward, the more meaningful it will be for them. But we absolutely cannot forget about the power of reflection. And you can embed reflection in throughout the experience so that students learn not only about what they're learning, but how they're learning. And they can relate that learning to real world situations. It's helpful to think about experiential learning as the umbrella that's over top of the inquiry or the project-based experience that you're creating. And it's helpful to think about that experiential learning cycle, because as we flow through the cycle, we move students from hands-on experiences to being reflective thinkers who create tangible solutions. So in our case, the problem was food sustainability, but the solution was some of the application, the technology that students experimented with, the forward thinking that they left the experience with. So as you prepare to execute your projects, think about a few key points. Identify the real world gap. So start with a specific need or a specific industry. So for us, it was the agri-tech industry. And ensure that the experience is relevant for students. You can ask your students what they're interested in and build the entire experience off of that. And it will be even more relevant and more meaningful to them. Look for opportunities to build strategic partnerships. So we had an opportunity to partner with Boreal Farms and STEM Minds. There are many incredible community partners that you can work with. And some of you were asking about experiential learning on a budget. And so sometimes it's just making those connections and networking with great community partners, because sometimes our community partners have access to sources of funding that we may not have within our education context. And sometimes those community partners can provide fantastic experiences for us. I'll give you an example. In our entrepreneurship program, we have been working with the YMCA. The YMCA offers a lot of free programming for schools, and will come in and support elevator pitch workshops and Dragon's Den type events. And so that is an incredible community partnership we've been able to develop at no cost to our schools. Reach out to your local community centers, your local libraries. We've had other schools be successful in our local libraries have set up maker spaces, and there have been opportunities for our schools to walk to the local library and participate in a makerspace opportunity that's all supported through that library. So when you're thinking about experiential learning on a budget, reach out to those community partners. Designed for the whole learner. So remember what I mentioned before about having intellectual stimulation, but also an opportunity for students to engage in social interaction while they're participating in the event. Engage the students in leading the inquiry. This is another way that you can build an experience on a budget, is by having students help to support in the building of the experience, or by integrating mentorship into the opportunity. So maybe your senior students develop an experience for your more junior students, and those students come in as the guest speaker for that opportunity. But don't forget to build in those reflective pauses. And some of you asked about assessment, and those reflective pauses are perfect opportunities for you to embed assessment in the process, whether it be through your own observations, your conversations with students, your assessment of their reflection, their self-assessment of their reflection as well. So a couple more key tips. Start small. Experiential learning can happen all the time. Experiential learning doesn't have to be that you took your students on a field trip or that you brought in a guest speaker. Experiential learning can be that you shift a regular lesson to be more interactive, more hands-on. You use a design thinking approach or an engineering design approach or a math problem-solving process, and that becomes the experience for students. So that activity can become the experience. And then you need to build in the reflection and the application. And it is through that reflection that you can then take that experience and broaden it and use it to plan forward. So you really do want to measure the impact so that you can continue to grow these experiences. But as I mentioned before, collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. There could be people within your own organization who are experts who can come in and provide an experience. There could be fantastic industry experts that you can bring in. You could have parents in your school community who are connected to industry experts who would be interested in coming in and creating experiences for your students. So hopefully that helps. And it has been an absolute pleasure to be here with you today. And we will be continuing this conversation through the chat on LinkedIn. But I will turn it now over to Sharif. And thank you for coming on this experiential learning journey with us today.
Well, thank you, Karen. Thank you very much. This reinforces that experiential learning is a process, not a one-off activity. Before we go off, I just want to highlight what EduForm is all about. It's a 3-day in-person experience focused on advancing experiential learning by bringing research and real classroom practice together. It is designed for K-12 educators and system leaders, and we will be gathering here at OISE, which is Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, in March. So do keep an eye out for registration details coming soon. This is a great opportunity to continue the conversation beyond today. Show us that you're interested by scanning the QR code you see in front of you and register your interest. Thank you very much again. Thank you, Karen. It's been a great session, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, everyone.